Hey, so the streaming service called Shudder is now in Australia, and I was super excited to hear about that because if you don't know what Shudder is, it's basically the Netflix for horror fans, where it's got a select library of, a bunch of horror stuff. The thing that is really good about it though is that it's not just your classic obvious picks, like it's a lot of indie stuff. It really kind of, it's a very particular niche of the genre and stuff that kind of like, it gives movies, I feel like, you know, if you get the app, it gives movies kind of a second chance to kind of be seen and stuff. And I mean, teenagers and stuff, just by the way, today don't know how goddamn lucky they are with access to stuff like this, because I wish that I had this exact thing when I was 15, you know, like horror, like cheap, low budget horror movies and all that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that you find on this app is exactly what I was looking for years. The stuff that I would rent from video shops and all that kind of thing back in the days. But now, you know, in one place, you got a bunch of them. That being said, a bunch is kind of being maybe a bit generous, because there is not that much. There's not that many titles and stuff, at least on the Australian version as of yet. I imagine they're going to add more stuff. You know, it's still a new streaming service and stuff, so I imagine it's not quite complete. They haven't quite sorted out everything that they're going to have. And I'm sure, you know, as streaming services go, they're probably going to continue adding stuff for, you know, for its lifetime. But yeah, just as of right now, I was a little bit disappointed with the lack of titles. There's not a lot of stuff on there. But that being said, I'm kind of a fan of that too, because it's like a select number of movies, and like it kind of makes, for one, your decisions easier in like choosing what to watch. But for two, it feels more like a curated service rather than you know, a service that's just slapping on any old title, no matter what it is. Like, it kind of feels like it's a streaming service with intent, because Shudder is very much something that has attitude. It has a personality. Like, you know, it's going for a certain vibe. It's not like Netflix, where like you can find documentaries, you can find stuff for teenage girls, you can find stuff like shitty kind of low budget action movies and all that kind of thing. Like, it's not like that. This is very much for fans of horror, which I am, and I was happy to see that. But it does have a good kind of mix of different subgenres and all that kind of thing. I was delighted to see a select few titles that were like in the horror comedy genre, which is a particular genre that just, I love it. It holds a special place in my heart. Horror comedy is just, it's made exactly for me. And there were quite a few movies on there that I haven't seen. Yeah, I watched a few, and yeah, they were pretty good. With that being said though, because of the low count of movies at the moment, I don't super think that Shudder is really worth keeping at the moment. You know, my kind of advice, if you're in Australia and this is a new service to you, I would say just get the trial and binge a bunch of stuff. That's what I did. I've watched about 10 movies on it so far at the moment. In this past week, I think I got a couple days left of the trial, so I'll squeeze in a few more in the next couple days. And at that, I've kind of exhausted my interests in terms of what's available there. You know, I watched the ones that I was interested in, and now I'm kind of like, yeah, okay. I don't know, maybe I'll get it again when they add more stuff, which again, I'm sure they will. But yeah, at the moment, I say just binge the trial. It's all good. Something that I do appreciate about Shudder is that it kind of shows promise of having some selection of foreign horror movies as well. A couple of the movies that I watched on here were foreign movies that I hadn't seen before, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, something that Shudder makes up for in its lack of selection is having a bunch of just cool movies that you wouldn't really see elsewhere, in terms of like, you know, being kind of edgier movies and stuff that maybe Netflix or other kinds of places wouldn't show particular types of movies and stuff. I watched this really good one that I particularly loved called Yummy the other night, and it's for a very select audience, but it hit me right in the nostalgia, basically. Like, it felt exactly like the kind of movies that I would have been renting 10 years ago. Like, it was kind of like this just sort of horror comedy that went very over the top in places and was very silly, but it was also kind of like a generic horror movie, but it was very violent, and it was fun. It wasn't like gritty. It wasn't trying to gross you out. It wasn't trying to be like all dark and stuff. Like, it was a silly movie, and I was really into this movie called Yummy. If you get Shudder, I would recommend watching that movie if you're into that kind of thing. And speaking of Yummy and other movies that I liked, I'm just going to go through some of the movies, just have some quick couple reviews here. I'll try and do them quick. Some of the stuff that I've watched, and some of the stuff, you know, I'll go through some of the movies here that I've already seen before, and that kind of thing as well. So first thing I've got written here, I watched Post the other day, which is that movie that's shot like it's a Zoom call thing. Everything is from the laptops and stuff, and it's kind of creative. It utilizes the idea well. It feels like it's a little bit more than just a gimmick. Like it kind of uses it pretty well. There's some interesting stuff. There's one part with a green screen that's quite creative, and I was kind of into that. It's pretty generic. It's pretty like jump scare, you know, it's pretty predictable, but it doesn't go too over the top too much. I do think that it does rely on flying bodies all over the place and all that kind of thing, you know, when like in Paranormal Activity, every movie has to end with somebody flying into the camera. It's a little bit like that, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's like an hour long, so it's all right. Next up, Random Acts of Violence, which was actually kind of disappointing, to be honest. It's based on a comic book writer who pretty much starts to experience the things that he wrote in his horror comic happen in real life, and I love that premise, but it didn't quite use the idea that well. It was a little boring, but it looked amazing, and it was directed by Jay Baruchel, which like is kind of surprising. It doesn't feel like his type of movie, apart from if you ignore the fact that he's also in it. You'd be surprised, because yeah, it does look very good. I was pretty impressed with that aspect of it, but the story was a bit Last Shift. It's a movie that I'd already seen before getting Shudder. It sucks. That movie really just kind of sucks, to be honest, but I mention it because that it's the perfect example of the type of stuff that I think Shudder should be streaming. Like, it's the kind of thing that, you know, particular audiences and stuff looking for this exact thing are going to be very happy with. This is the type of movie that Shudder is for, to be honest. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of this one at all, I don't like it at all, really. I think it's kind of shit. But I do think that it's a good choice for this sort of streaming service, if that makes sense. Then there's High Tension, which I'd already seen before. If you haven't seen High Tension, be cautious. But it's quite good if you're into that kind of genre, the more extreme sides of horror and stuff. It's kind of one that you kind of have to see, I guess. It's kind of required viewing, I suppose, if you're like a horror fan. I think it's a little overrated personally, but let's get to next. Husk is another one that I've got written down, and it is another one that I'd already seen before getting Shudder. It's a scary scarecrow movie, but it's a pretty good one. Then there's this other one. I'll just say the few that I'd seen before getting Shudder first. Wormwood is one that you should definitely see. I've got it on DVD somewhere over here. It's an Australian comedy horror zombie movie, and it's very fun. I saw it in cinemas, and it's one of my favorite cinema going experiences, when everybody kind of realized what the vibe of the movie was, and everybody started to laugh at everything that was happening. It was a very unanimous sort of like this. There was just like this feeling in there that everybody was into it and got what it was going for, and it was a very fun experience. Another one is called The Woman, one of the most violent movies I've ever seen, so if you're into that, yeah, there you go. But a few movies that I saw just because they were on Shudder and I hadn't seen them before. A couple of them are Shudder exclusives even. This one called Ruin Me was alright. It's not the best ever. It's not gonna blow you away, and it's a bit messy. It kind of doesn't know what it wants to be at some points, but the basic premise is that they're going on like this kind of, it's kind of like an escape room type of thing, but they're out in the woods and they're camping out and stuff. So, you know, it's a perfect recipe for like the cliche kind of slasher thing to happen, Jason Voorhees and all that kind of shit. It veers off in a few different directions. There's this one part that feels a bit more like Saw than it does a slasher, but it's pretty good. I was pretty into it, and it got deeper than I was expecting. It wasn't quite as comedic as I was expecting. So if that sounds interesting, I would say check it out. It was alright. Another one I watched is Downrange. This is one that I was going into expecting dumb fun, but it was just horrific, and it's very well done. This is a fucking great movie, actually, to be honest. It's very mean-spirited. Again, this is another one where I would say be cautious if you're not into the violence, if you're not into horror. But, you know, if you're watching this video and you're interested in Shudder, I'm gonna guess that you are. But this is about these people who, well, it's basically a sniper horror movie. It's basically the bloodiest kind of depictions of shootings that I've ever seen in my life. It's basically, yeah, this group of people who are on a road trip, and there's a sniper after them, and they just get stuck in a bad situation, and that's really all it's about. And it's just how hopeless they are against this, you know, this guy who doesn't miss. And it's pretty cool. It's actually really good. And I will also say that the acting in this movie actually impressed me a lot, like, surprisingly. Yeah, this is actually one of my favorites on the entire app, probably, to be honest. Another one is called Sightseers. This is a horror comedy that I was very interested in seeing, about just these very generic people who happen to get into some darker things. And it's very not over the top. It's very dry in its delivery, but it's hilarious. It's very dark, but it's also kind of like, I don't know, it feels more accessible. It's very entertaining, but it is quite slow. I do feel like some people find it boring, but this is exactly the kind of movie I like. I thought it was I thought it was pretty good. Another one that I got here written is Scare Package, which was pretty disappointing, to be honest. It was about this guy who works at like a video shop, and he is explaining the genre of horror and how to survive it or something. It was kind of confusing. There was a lot of like meta humor in there and stuff, and like I was kind of into some of it, but then it would kind of just change course again and it would focus on something else, and it was like, yeah, okay, this isn't very good. It was also kind of cringy. It was like trying to be funny, but like kind of just wasn't. And now for the highlights. I just want to name a few more movies that are on Shudder that I would recommend seeing. I guess that I should probably also include Sightseers and Downrange in there as well, to be honest, but the way I've got it written down here, these are my highlights. Time Crimes is one of the most creative movies on this streaming service, I would say. It's not really that much of a horror movie, but it kind of is. It plays with some of the tropes, and it has a masked killer and stuff, so, you know, in a way it will serve what you're looking for in that type of thing, but it goes in a different direction than you're expecting. I don't want to say too much about it, but, you know, with the title you can assume what kind of thing it is. There's some time travel involved, okay, and it's very fun, and it's very interesting to think about. Like, once you start thinking about the timelines that are going on and you start to think about how all this stuff is working, that's possibly my favorite part of the movie, just how it gets me to think about it, and you start trying to figure out the logic and all that kind of thing. I absolutely loved this movie. I definitely would recommend Time Crimes. Next up is One Cut of the Dead. This is creative. If you want to see a creative movie, this is the one. This is like a zombie horror comedy kind of movie, but it's also it gets kind of wholesome at parts. You really actually begin to care for the people, and it's executed surprisingly well. A lot of it is shot in one take. Again, this is another movie that I don't want to say too much about. I really don't want to give it away. This is a movie that it's best to go in not knowing anything, but I will say this, that the first half hour is not good. Objectively, it's just not very good. So if it doesn't grasp your attention, you know, if you're not really liking it for the first half hour, keep watching it. Trust me, you will be glad that you did. Just pay attention to why it's not very good in that first half hour as well, because it's relevant and it pays off later. Yeah, One Cut of the Dead is a big recommend. And The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which was a movie that I'd already seen before as well, but again, it's just a very solidly executed type of movie that's kind of about like the paranormal stuff and possessive and everything and stuff, but it's a bit better than that. It's not just the generic kind of crap. It's just, well, I guess it's sort of generic, but it's just that it's made very well. Like, it's one of the better ones if you're into that kind of genre, which typically I'm not really, to be honest, unless it's done very well, like Insidious and The Conjuring and stuff. I wouldn't say that The Autopsy of Jane Doe touches those, not even close, but I would say that it is pretty good. And yeah, if you like the genre, check it out. Okay, so another couple aspects to Shudder that I wanted to mention was that it has this feature called Shudder TV, which is kind of like this live thing that they've got. They've got like 3 different channels or whatever that I guess it's live and it's the same for everyone. Like, you can be watching it at the same time, but it seems pretty pointless to me. I don't really get it, because it's just the movies that they've got in their selection. So it's like, I can just watch it from the start whenever I want. Like, I don't get why the TV thing is appealing, to be honest, but it's there. If you want it, it's there, so whatever. A complaint that I do have for the streaming service is that there is no proper console support in Australia. At least you can't get it on, at least the one I tried, on Xbox One. There is a workaround. I'm not going to get too into that. You figure it out for yourself, but let's just say let's just say there's a workaround, and it's very simple. You don't need to be like a fucking, you know, IT guy, or you don't need to be a programmer or some shit like that. figure it out. The categories are alright, I guess. Like there's a good selection of categories. Like there's one that's like monster movies. There's one that's like, I don't really remember specifically, but there was like slasher stuff and that kind of thing and stuff. And you know, it kind of gives you a bit of an easier way to find the stuff that you might be interested in. But for me personally, I found these to be kind of useless in a way. I guess it's good that they're there, but the thing is that it's a lot of the same movies repeating over and over because they're in multiple categories, and so you're looking at the same movies and then you're missing out on a bunch of others, and it just kind of feels a little bit like a waste of time, to be honest. So it was easier for me. Something that I appreciated is that they have just a category of all movies. Every movie that they have. I wish Netflix had something like this because I haven't been able to see anything like that. I love this aspect of having every movie listed and just going through them, adding anything I'm slightly interested in to my watch list. It made it a lot easier instead of having to look at 50 different categories. I just looked at the one list, added everything I was interested in, and it was fantastic. I absolutely love that feature, to be honest. I think more movies should have it. One thing is that maybe they only have it because there's not that many movies. So maybe it's like, it's this or that. Like, which one do you want? A big selection or an all movies category? It would be good if they met somewhere in the middle with a big selection of movies. Still that one list of all of them. But at the moment, we're just left with that category of all movies listed. Something else that I wanted to comment on, and maybe this is boring, but this is more like just the feature of fast forward, just like the fast forwarding option. It kind of works like Netflix, which I appreciate, where you just kind of, at least on the Xbox One, you kind of just scroll to get, like, it skips like 5-10 seconds, whatever it is, that kind of thing. It's better than I feel like some of the other streaming services are. I don't know, maybe that's just personal preference. Maybe this is a boring thing that you don't care about, but I appreciate being able to scroll with the stupid analog stick thing instead of using the trigger and accidentally skipping the entire fucking movie or whatever it is. That can happen on some of the other services. It just skips like 5-10 seconds and you can just keep going for a bit. Like, I don't know, if there's something you don't want to see, you just want to skip something, like, you know, it's there. It's a good option. Like, you know, if there's a scene that's, I don't know, maybe too violent for you or something, it's like, skip. It's an easy feature to use. I mean, I say feature, it's fast forward. I mean, it's not anything special, but I just wanted to comment on it because it works a little bit better than some other services, I noticed. I don't know, maybe that matters to you if you're thinking about getting it. Something I will say though, being a problem, I guess, is that when I first launched the app, it was very fucking slow. Like, nothing was working at all. I honestly think it's because of Shudder TV. Like, it slows everything down as it tries to connect. So as soon as you launch the app, just click off of that, like, straight away if you can, because I don't know why Shudder TV is a thing. It really doesn't have to be. But yeah, again, it kind of fucked up when I first opened it, but ever since, it's been absolutely fine. No troubles, it's all good, it works. Maybe I just have the best internet ever, so fuck you guys if you have bad internet and it won't work for you. I don't know. I can only speak for myself, but it's working fine ever since. Shudder works good for me, so that's all good. Again, if you haven't seen these movies, I would say it's worth getting for, you know, at least the month if you don't have time to binge them all. But yeah, it's cool. It's good. I like it. I like Shudder. It's got kind of a cool punk rock horror attitude kind of thing. It's got a good mix of horror comedy, slasher comedy, horror comedy, slasher, horror, you know, I don't know, like monster movies, violent movies, whatever kind of thing you're in for. There's probably at least 2 or 3 to 10 movies of each kind of subgenre or whatever, depending on which one you're talking about. You know, there's a good number of zombie movies and that kind of thing. So yeah, I like it, but it needs a bigger library, or at least it needs kind of a promise. It needs to show that they're gonna be adding more. Without that, it kind of makes me not want to keep being a subscriber, because it just doesn't feel like it's worth it that much. But if they start advertising some stuff to come, or if they do, I don't know, if they do some stuff like that, they just need to add some more stuff. But apart from that, it's a very good app. I like it. I know this isn't what I normally talk about and that kind of thing, but it gave me an avenue to discuss some movies and do some quick movie reviews within this video. And I don't know, I just wanted to talk about it because I've been excited for this streaming service for a long time. We never had it in Australia, and it annoyed the shit out of me because I really wanted it. And so, yeah, that is all. Thanks for watching. Do the things. Do all those things. You know, the YouTubey things. Like and comment and share and subscribe. Do those, and I'll be a happy boy. Adios.